Gerald Gidel has new estimates for the December USDA WASDE report, and yet he's going to comment about the corn and soybean markets. We're right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, we have had a steady market this week. Corn has bounced a little bit on Friday, and soybean was stable for the the upcoming month. So, what's your overview on the markets before we jumping into the estimates for the USD?
No, you're exactly right. It's been kind of a choppy session, but actually, of all things, the corn market has had a little strength this week. We had some very good shipments earlier this week. We've been kind of, saying around, excuse me, uh, 30 million or so on that, and also the beans. Had a very good number of 76 million earlier in the week. So we had a little strength then things kind of lacklustered out through Tuesday and Wednesday. There's some rain around in Argentina, and that, and then when we bounced back towards the end of the week. Also, maybe some numbers here that happened earlier on Monday. Here we had our crush statistics here for the month of October. The trade was looking for about 210, 212 or so million number. I was on, and that came in at virtually 216, 215.7 on crush. That really is related to the fact that we're getting some expanded production that's been scheduled to come on board finally here, and there's still a prospect that that might still have some higher ones yet this winter, which is going to make things interesting from the point of view that the U.S. livestock markets and that we're not really putting any more cattle on feed. The hogs numbers are kind of steady to maybe a little lower, and we've had all this bird flu issues going out, and so that's hurt some of the poultry demand. So hopefully we can get some of that sold in the world markets at this point on the meal side, but that's something that has to be determined going forward. We've had some pretty good strengths in the weekly ethanol production numbers, and that kind of got reflected in this week's ethanol corn grind that was also out on Monday at 460 million. Actually, they increased the last month's September's numbers by 7 million. I kind of feel like that number of 460 could still be closer to 465 to 470 myself. So we'll see if they make adjustment on it, but still a very good number. So those are the positive we had early in the week, but just because of the time of year we are and the prospects of the exports channels to start slowing down here because of the lack of ability to send barges down the Mississippi, it really does slow down our potential export numbers as we go forward here this winter. So those are the things that kind of continued to haunt this market a little bit. But as I said, at the end of the week here, we've had some very good export sales again, 76, 77 million on beans. We had, from that standpoint, uh, with the excuse me, that was the actual shipments we had at 85 million in sales, and that we're just amazingly on both corn and soybeans for the this year versus last year. We've really got some big impressive numbers on the books here. Now, that doesn't mean that we could slow down if we have a huge crop in South America, but right now at least, I think it does also suggest that the world's a little cautious about last year's crop sizes in South America, and also what might be happening here with European weather, Ukrainian weather, Russian weather. Uh, that's definitely could be a feature in this corn since it's at 330 million ahead of a year ago on that one, and on beans we're 140 million ahead of last year. So we've definitely got plenty of stuff on the books. The biggest key question is uh, will be will that make an impact on the USDA's numbers next week?
Yeah, so I took a glance on your numbers right before the show, and as compared to November, your estimates for the December report does not bring a lot of changes for either of the crops, either one of the crops, corn or soy.
Well, the comparison to the trade there, I have to maybe make a little difference there. The trade is not anticipating any changes in the soybean carryover stock, and I kind of feel like that, as I just mentioned, that the export sales on beans are, so far ahead of last year. They, interestingly enough, last month, uh, when they decreased the production numbers for the U.S. crops, soybean crop by, well, I think it was 120 million, in the generalities, I should say, and like it's a 1.4 bushel yield. And that they just, oh, well, we got to cut back on our crush and our exports, but we haven't done that at all. We've continued to have both of those go at a very strong pace, and I'm wondering if that they potentially could put back the 40 million that. That they decreased out of the demand. I am the lowest one out there. There's no doubt in that regard on the numbers, but really, seasonally at this point, we are tremendously ahead of last year's pace. So the prospects of at least uh, bringing back the numbers they took away last month, I think, is still a possibility. Are we going to be able to take the USDA surprisingly in December? Probably going to go ahead and go down to 400 million. Nah, that's not going to happen. They don't have anything to base it upon at this point. There's lots of people out there who want to say South America crop sizes are going to be increased. There's a lot of them who think that the USDA is just going to punt this month and leave both Brazil and Argentina's production numbers unchanged. I still have a kind of an interesting twist on that for the corn side of things down there. I've really continued to hear a lot of numbers floating around. I'm not sure if you've
Well,
sent it to me.
I spoke to an Argentinian analyst, Pablo Adriani, this week, and he told me that the major reason behind the record crop advance for soybeans is that the planting progress for soybeans is that most of the farmers will not plant corn at the first date, so they will plant the first soybeans. So there was a major switch at the planting intentions in Argentina. So for the first soybeans there, there is an increase in surface, a significant one, even though the total surface at the end will be similar.
I see. They say uh, the the spring. It's kind of interesting in the fact that some people are talking about those changes in Argentina based upon the leafhopper issues. You're talking about some weather issue situations out there on corn versus soybeans. From there, the early indications we were down 500 to nearly hectares and plantings back in the spring. From there, I kind of really feel like that. Right now, Argentina is really the swing factor down there on corn plantings and what they do. I'm kind of actually anticipating the USDA to step up and make some reaction to some reduced corn plantings out there to prompt a smaller number than their 51 million they've been carrying for a while here, and maybe even increase the Brazilian number by 1 million metric tons from there. So that's that's kind of interesting in the world numbers. We haven't had a, a lot of changes in those numbers. They kind of set their number and then they wait to see what the growing condition is going to be or not going to be. And they might continue that same process again this year. It's an interesting world in the fact that the and the other twist of it is too that the world corn prices are not very strong. So in reality, switching some of their corn area down to soybeans is not surprising, relatively speaking, even without the leafhopper scenario. But that's I think is really still has a lot of influences on what Argentina does
And
or
by the
doesn't
way,
do.
I think the market will focus a lot in Argentina in the upcoming months, not only because of the season, but the government has already said for the 2025 budget that there will be no tax reductions yet for the corn and soybean complex. But yet, well, there will be a lot of pressure by the farmers because the profitability is not very favorable at this time.
Oh, I totally agree that particularly if you've had some currency issues along the way and things of that nature, there is some various commentary in both Brazil and Argentina about that situation impacting some of their decisions. From there, I totally agree that the South America really has financial issues, and I still think that there's some swing situations here. We put the bean crop in a little later plantings down there, and that wasn't horrendous. It wasn't as we haven't had as bad of conditions down there once we got them planted like we did in beans last year in Brazil. From there, but last year they were looking for 164 to 166. It came in 153, and I still feel like that number might be less than 153 from last year. Uh, and the same thing in Argentina. And so I think those are some of the issues that still haunt this market. And particularly as you mentioned here in the upcoming numbers for next Tuesday, uh, there will be some international numbers, and they'll be really concentrated primarily on South America, on those numbers. But I think the other twist of it is that a lot of times, and there's a lot of people that put their estimates in here from the U.S. S&D numbers that have understand there's been a lot of times when there's not been a lot of change in the U.S. demand numbers. But I think given the fact that we have such strong exports. We've had some good ethanol runs here on the U.S. And that we've had, you know, uh, things of that nature. I kind of feel like that the U.S. corn demand numbers could rebound here. Well, they didn't really change much last month, but I still think that they might end up increasing ethanol by 25 million in that, and they might increase exports by 50. It's more of a looking at the reality of being 330 million ahead of a year ago on sales and on corn exports and beans, as I mentioned before, over 100 million ahead of a year ago. So those are going to be the situations here that will probably set the tone for next week's markets as we kind of chop along in here. As right now, at least, is that those are the factors out there. Wheat, by the way, not likely to have many changes in that one. From there, interesting things in the wheat market overall is the fact that it looks like that both uh, Russia and now Ukraine have decided that they're really not going to be selling things on the low end of these prices out here. They just feel like the Russians kind of threw that as back earlier in the fall, and now the Ukrainians have kind of suggested they're not going to be big sellers of grain until things improve, and we're just bumping along at the long-term support here around $5.50 in the U.S. So we'll see what that has to do with it. But unfortunately, right now the weather situation is really kind of concentrated on Australia, and right now they're anticipating a couple million metric ton larger crop than last year. So
Yeah, and next week we're still going to follow the developments with trade between the U.S. and Mexico, U.S. and China.
that subject matter is not going to go away with our current president-elect. It looks like a couple times here in the Mexicans have tried to offer out some ideas and some concepts about things and that, but somehow or other, uh, Donald Trump thinks that they should take all the illegal Venezuelans and Central Americans and have them all dump them over the border. And Mexicans aren't excited about that either. So if you're going to end up sending them home, send them home. Fly them back there. You don't have to put them on our property and they're going to walk back. Type situation. So right now, that situation's kind of hovering over the market too, on the international side of things here at this point. From there the Canadians, I think that particular issue might be kind of uh, reduced simmering on that a little bit. China, I have no idea if there's any connection between uh, the two countries here that's going to get worked out, at least until sometime after the new president-elect gets into office here at this point. It could be just a war of a worlds going forward, it seems like to me.
All right, we'll check back next week after the report. Thank you.
Exactly, exactly. Everyone have a good December. And at this point, we're up and down in temps, but stay warm.